A man named Eric is on a walk with his dog, Nova. It's a Thursday afternoon in late September, the kind of day where the leaves are just beginning to turn and the air carries that crisp promise of autumn. Nova, a 3-year-old border collie mix with striking amber eyes, trots happily beside him, her tail wagging in perpetual optimism. They're walking along the trail that winds through Riverside Park, a route they've taken dozens of times before. Eric is lost in thought when suddenly a rabbit bursts from a bush directly beside them. The suddenness triggers something primal in Nova. Before Eric can react, she lunges forward with surprising force. The leash, which he'd been holding loosely while reaching for his phone, slips cleanly through his fingers. "Nova! No!" Eric shouts, but it's too late. She's already 20 feet ahead, her powerful legs propelling her in pursuit of the rabbit. Eric breaks into a run, but his chase only fuels her excitement. To Nova, this is a game now. She picks up speed, weaving between trees, leaping over fallen logs, the rabbit nowhere to be seen, but the thrill of the hunt still driving her forward. Eric runs until his lungs burn. He calls her name until his voice is hoarse, but Nova has disappeared completely, swallowed by the dense woods that border the park. After an hour of desperate searching, Eric trudges back to his car, his heart heavy with dread. Back home, Eric can't sit still. He immediately posts on every local lost pet group, uploads photos and calls animal shelters. By evening, he's printed 100 flyers with Nova's photo and the word reward in bold letters. He spends the rest of the day and the days following searching for Nova. He enlists his brother Jake and friend Maria to help, puts up signs throughout a 5-mile radius, and walks every trail at dawn. A week goes by and Nova is still missing. Eric is devastated beyond comprehension. He thinks about how horribly unlucky it was that the rabbit jumped out at just the wrong time, and that his hand position was just wrong enough to allow Nova to pull the leash from it. The randomness of it all tortures him. 8 days later, on a Friday evening, Eric is sitting on his couch when there's a knock at his door. When he opens it, he finds a woman standing there, and beside her, tail wagging frantically, is Nova. "Nova!" Eric drops to his knees and Nova crashes into him, whimpering and licking his face. Eric wraps his arms around her, tears streaming down his face. After several minutes of this chaotic, heartwarming reunion, Eric looks up at the woman. "Thank you," he manages to say. "Thank you so much. Where did you find her?" The woman smiles warmly. "She showed up in my backyard this afternoon over on Maple Street. That's about 2 miles from here. I saw your flyer at the grocery store and recognized her immediately." "I can't thank you enough," Eric says, standing up. "I'm Eric, by the way." "Vanessa," she says. She's beautiful, dark hair, kind eyes, probably about his age. Eric invites her in for water, and they end up talking on his front porch for over an hour. Vanessa is a graphic designer who works from home. They discover they frequent the same places and share a love of hiking. Eric finds himself laughing for the first time in over a week. She's funny, easy to talk to, and clearly loves animals. Before she leaves, they exchange numbers. Over the next few weeks, they text occasionally. Then Vanessa asks if Eric and Nova would like to join her for a hike. They grab coffee afterward, then dinner the following week. Eric finds himself thinking about her constantly. She's gorgeous, kind, thoughtful. She once showed up at his door at 10 p.m. with ice cream because he'd mentioned having a rough day. She's smart and spontaneous. She makes him laugh. Everything about being with her feels right. Soon Eric and Vanessa fall in love. The relationship is everything one could reasonably hope a relationship to be. Eric thinks about how lucky it was that Vanessa was the person who happened to be in the right place at the right time to find and return Nova. If someone else had found her, he would never have met Vanessa. A couple of months into their relationship, on a Wednesday evening in early December, Eric is driving to pick up Vanessa for dinner. He's running late, distracted by a work call. The roads are wet from earlier rain. He's approaching an intersection, the light green, when a black SUV barrels through from the perpendicular street, running the red light at full speed. The SUV T-bones Eric's car on the driver's side with a sickening crunch of metal. The impact sends Eric's car spinning 3 full rotations as airbags explode around him. His head slams against something hard despite the airbag. Then, darkness. An hour or so later, Eric finds himself in a hospital bed. A doctor explains what happened. He was in a serious car accident and suffered a severe concussion and head injury. They're going to run tests and perform a CT scan to check for internal bleeding or brain damage. The other driver had been looking at his phone. As his consciousness fully returns, Eric is overwhelmed by anger and despair. He thinks about how unlucky he was to have been driving to Vanessa's place at that exact moment, taking that exact route, going through that exact intersection precisely when that distracted driver ran the light. 30 seconds earlier or later and he would have missed it entirely. What if he has permanent brain damage? What if his life is ruined because of this one random collision of circumstances? Eric is held overnight for observation. Vanessa sits beside his bed, holding his hand, her eyes red from crying. The next morning the doctor returns. "Eric, how are we doing?" he asks. "Fine. A little fuzzy, I guess," Eric replies. "Yeah, I would certainly imagine. You took quite the smack," the doctor says. "Yeah," Eric responds. "So I've reviewed the CT scan, and I have some bad news. But I also have some good news." Confused, Eric says, "Okay, I guess I'll take the bad news first." "Well, technically, they're the same piece of news," the doctor says carefully. "What do you mean?" Eric asks, his concern escalating. "The bad news is that we found what appears to be a glioma in your brain." The doctor pauses. "It's a tumor. The good news, though, is we found what appears to be a glioma in your brain." "What do you mean?" "How is that good news?" Eric asks. The doctor leans forward. "This tumor has nothing to do with your accident. You actually got out of the accident relatively unharmed. But because of your accident, we ran the brain scan. Because of the brain scan, we found a tumor. Normally, we only catch a tumor like this after someone realizes something's wrong when they start to feel the symptoms, which is almost always too late. Because we found the tumor right now, though, we caught it while it's still benign, before it became malignant and grew into any other areas of your brain, which in almost all cases becomes fatal. Since it's still in this stage, though, we should be able to remove it almost entirely without any issue. Eric, in a weird way, this car accident basically saved your life. So you see, it's sort of good news disguised as bad news," the doctor concludes. Eric feels a strange visceral tingling sensation and becomes slightly disoriented. Maybe it's the concussion. Maybe it's the emotion of the situation. Maybe it's the fact that the doctor just essentially said the same thing twice, but Eric experienced 2 totally different mental responses. Maybe it's everything. He looks around the room. He thinks about how lucky he was to have been going to get Vanessa in that exact direction at that exact time. How lucky he was to have gotten in the car accident. The thought feels absurd, almost offensive, but he is lucky. If that driver hadn't been distracted, if Eric had taken a different route, he'd be healthy right now, but he'd also be dying, slowly, unknowingly. He thinks about Nova running away. At the time, it had felt like the worst thing that could happen, but if Nova hadn't run away, he never would have met Vanessa. He thinks about how weird it is to think this, for something so bad to be so good, and for something so good to be so bad. In this moment, Eric realizes how little he knows about what anything actually is, that he has never and can never know what exists on the other side of anything that happens to him or because of him, no matter how good or bad, lucky or unlucky any of it might seem. Eric feels a strange, paradoxical sense of helplessness and liberation. About a week later, Eric undergoes brain surgery to remove the tumor. The procedure takes 6 hours. Vanessa and Eric's family wait in the surgical waiting room, trying not to imagine the worst. The surgery is successful. They removed the entire tumor. Eric is mostly as good as new, with exception to a scar running down the side of his scalp. Several days later, after being released from the hospital, Eric is recovering at home with Vanessa. After a week of being cooped up inside, he needs fresh air. "I'm taking Nova for a walk," he announces. They walk slowly, the 3 of them in the late afternoon sun. Nova trots happily between them, her leash firmly wrapped around Eric's wrist. The air is cold and clean. Eric's head aches slightly, but it's manageable. He's alive. He's recovering. He's with someone he loves. He doesn't know what will happen tomorrow, but he also doesn't know what good might come from whatever happens next. He's learned to hold both possibilities at once. They turn the corner toward home, and Eric notices how the evening light catches in Vanessa's hair. Nova pulls slightly on the leash. Eric smiles. This moment is enough.